We good? Okay. So, as college students, it's fair to say that we go through a lot of tests. Probably on average, students in a college setting are either preparing for, taking a test, or worrying about an exam that they're about to take sometime in the near future, often within the next few days. This can be a very stressful part of life for many at a university or public school setting. But also, it's interesting that this has been defined as the way we scale progress. And I say that in a student's ability to perform in a given subject. But is that really the best way to do it? To go about deciding who knows the material and who doesn't? My name is Brad Daniels, and I'd like to talk about this a little bit today, of how really test taking isn't the best way to go about judging whether a student performs, whether a student knows the material or not. There's a better way of saying that. And also, in recent years, it has been very brought to attention, this subject. In fact, many years ago, and this affects all elementary students today, and many for the past decade or so. A few years ago, a Congress Act was passed called No Child Left Behind, in which Congress, or the government, stipulated that students will have to pass a series of standardized testing in order to see which school gets the public funding. There are other aspects to it, of course, but that's one of the more relevant aspects of it. This can be viewed as a great way of bringing about funding, but also a subject has come up where teachers begin teaching towards the test, in the sense that they teach students to prepare them for the test and not necessarily to understand the material, to understand the subject matter. And that can be very complicated, especially when we get to more close to adult setting, when students really need that practical ability of the material they've been learning in order to perform well in the workforce, and also to just have capable understanding of the material they're being taught. Also, one of the most successful businessmen in the world, named Bill Gates, runs Microsoft, hugely successful. He said this on the following. He said, "Research shows that there is only half as much variation in student achievement between schools as there is among classrooms in the same school. If you want your child to get the best education possible, it is actually more important to get him assigned to a great teacher rather than a great school." And so that's something that we have to consider as well, is that teaching, the style that the teacher uses to teach the students, greatly affects the outcome, especially on tests. In fact, in a recent poll taken, which involved many of my classmates in the public speaking class, almost 80% of them agreed that a selection of a teacher has a great influence on the final test score in the class. Whether that comes by midterms or the final, whatever it may be, the teacher plays a big role into that. Which is interesting to think about when you consider, how many students go on to rate my professor when they're selecting classes. That's why that website exists, is because students have been trained that in order to do well in the class, you have to do well on the tests. In order to do well on the tests, you have to find a good teacher who will prepare you for the tests. That doesn't always translate into which teacher is the best teacher, but which teacher can help me perform the best on the test, or who gives easier tests, I should say. Also, just in conclusion, an ancient Chinese proverb reads, "Tell me and I'll forget, show me and I'll remember, involve me and I'll understand." And this is very applicable today in this setting. Test taking is not the most effective form to judge a student's understanding of a material. I mean, especially when we think of standardized testing as far as acceptance into colleges. Some students don't perform well on tests. Does that mean they're incapable learners? No. In fact, some of the most brightest people I know did not do well on the SAT or ACT. But what could be alternatives to this? Again, referring to that poll that was taken involving this class, the number one alternative used was in-class projects. Stuff that will help us to understand the material and present it in a way that we can actually show what we've been learning. And in fact, that's what I'm doing right now. I am doing a classroom project to understand my skills as a public speaker, as many of my classmates are doing as well, all of them, in fact. But this is by far a more effective way of learning. Is it easier? Not in that sense. So don't be fooled into thinking that tests are more effective because they're harder. Projects can be difficult and time-consuming, but they also involve students more and are more effective. Thank you.